Ever wonder why a polar bear has white fur? Perfectly blending into the Arctic snow.
Hmm.
Or how a tiny cactus can just thrive under that blazing desert sun.
Yeah, it seems like such a perfect fit, doesn't it? Like design.
Exactly. But what's really driving these incredible adaptations we see everywhere in the living world,
Yeah.
it kind of makes you think about the really fundamental forces, right?
It absolutely does. And that initial question, it leads us straight to one of the most powerful ideas in biology, natural selection.
Right.
And today, we're not just going to define it. We're really going to dive into a perspective that might just change how you think about why living things are the way they are.
Perfect. So for you listeners who really want to get to the core of complex stuff quickly and thoroughly, well, this deep dive is definitely for you.
Hmm.
We've been looking at this fascinating discussion. It tackles natural selection head on, but then it throws in this real curveball, the selfish gene theory.
Yeah, it's a lens that offers a surprisingly different angle on the whole evolution thing.
So our mission today is basically to unpack these big ideas. We want to distill them down.
Make them clear, yeah. We want you to walk away with a solid grasp of natural selection and also the, let's say, provocative ideas of the selfish gene theory.
Right. Maybe even see the world in a slightly new light afterwards.
Consider this your kind of rapid immersion into some pretty revolutionary biological concepts.
Okay, so where do we start? How do we unpack this?
Let's lay the groundwork first with natural selection itself. The audio we explored gave a really solid explanation.
Okay.
At its heart, it's this simple but honestly profound idea that organisms need specific traits to, well, thrive in their particular environment.
Right. Like, think about those desert plants again. They have these really unique adaptations to hold on to water, completely different from plants in, say, a humid rainforest.
Exactly. It's a direct link, you see, between their traits and their survival in that specific place.
And the polar bear's white fur.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
not just random. It's a massive survival advantage. Camouflage in the snow.
Makes them better hunters.
Better hunters, less visible to prey. That trait directly helps them survive, find food, and crucially, reproduce.
Okay, that makes sense. The audio then used this example of 100 deer facing a sudden colder climate.
Yeah.
That really helped me picture the selection part.
It's a classic illustration, yeah. So the temperature drops. Any deer that happen to have maybe even just slightly thicker fur or, better fat reserves.
Some pre-existing advantage.
Precisely. A pre-existing advantage for dealing with cold. They're just more likely to survive the harsh winter. They aren't, magically growing thicker fur because it got cold.
They just already had something that worked better.
And what do they pass on?
That cold-resistant trait.
Right. They pass on the genes for that trait to their offspring.
So over generations, the whole deer population starts to shift. You'd expect to see more and more deer that are better equipped for the cold.
Mm-hmm. The environment has essentially selected for that characteristic, filtered out the ones less suited.
It's a passive filter.
That's a great way to put it. And you can see this even more starkly, at the microbial level. Think about that lab experiment example.
With the bacteria.
Yeah, 100 bacteria in a dish. You add an antibiotic.
Okay. Most die off, presumably.
Right, most are vulnerable. But maybe, just by chance, a few already have a gene that gives them some resistance. What happens to them?
They survive. And they multiply.
Exactly. They survive, they reproduce, and soon the whole population is dominated by antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Selection in action.
What's so powerful about these examples, for me anyway, is that the environment isn't consciously trying to adapt to anything.
No, not at all.
It just exists.
Yeah.
And it acts as this filter, letting those with the right traits pass through and reproduce more successfully.
That is such a crucial point. Natural selection isn't directed. There's no goal in mind. It's just the natural consequence of variation, inheritance, and differences in survival and reproduction. And this understanding, this foundation, really sets the stage for the selfish gene idea, which gives us a pretty radical perspective on what exactly is being selected.
All right, let's dive into that then. This intriguing selfish gene idea, the audio pointed to Richard Dawkins in his big book, right?
Yeah, the selfish gene, groundbreaking stuff. The core idea Dawkins put forward is that natural selection doesn't primarily act on the whole organism or even groups. It acts at the level of the genes.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, the audio emphasized that genes, bits of DNA code, that happen to build organisms with traits boosting survival and reproduction. Those are the genes that get copied and passed on more often.
So it's like our bodies are just vehicles.
In this view, yes, incredibly complex temporary vehicles or strategies that our genes use to ensure their long-term survival across generations. It kind of flips the usual way we think about evolution.
So the gene itself is the fundamental thing being selected for or against.
That's the argument. Genes are the replicators. They're the bits of information that get copied and passed down, mostly intact, generation after generation.
Okay.
And Dawkins uses the metaphor that these genes act as if they are selfish, purely focused on their own replication and survival.
He's selfish, but not literally, right?
Yeah.
Genes don't have intentions or feelings.
Exactly right. You've hit the key point. The selfishness is purely metaphorical. It describes the outcome, the consequence.
Huh.
Genes that, just by chance, lead to traits that make their own copying more likely, like building a faster deer or a more camouflaged polar bear. Those genes will naturally become more common over time. It's just how the process works. Not because the gene wants anything.
Got it. The audio then brought up this really striking concept, genes building survival machines. What does that mean exactly?
So according to this theory, these survival machines are us. They're animals, plants, fungi, the physical bodies of all living organisms. They are the vehicles, the contraptions, the machines that genes construct around themselves to ensure their own protection and ultimately their propagation.
So everything. Carbohydrates, lipids, cells, tissues, organs. Our whole bodies.
From this perspective, yes. It's all part of the machinery built by genes, serving the purpose of helping those genes survive and get copied into the next generation.
So if I'm hearing this right, from the gene's point of view, we humans are basically just sophisticated gene delivery systems.
That's a concise way to put it, yeah. Maybe a bit provocative, but it captures the essence of the viewpoint. Our primary biological role, seen through this lens, is to carry and transmit the genes we're made of.
Hang on, the audio raised a really important point there. Humans, we live for maybe 70, 80 years, hopefully longer, but then we die, and our unique set of genes seems to die with us. So how do these supposedly selfish genes get around that, the limited lifespan of their machine?
Ah, yes. That's where reproduction becomes absolutely central. The selfish genes solve the problem of individual mortality by programming their survival machines, us, with a powerful, often overwhelming drive to reproduce.
Oh, okay.
Reproduction is the mechanism. It's how genes build new survival machines, new bodies, new offspring, to carry copies of themselves into the future. It ensures their continuity beyond the lifespan of any single individual.
So the D drives we feel, connection, family, sex. From this gene-centric view, it's less about our personal happiness.
And more about mechanisms honed over millions of years to ensure genetic propagation. It can feel like a sobering perspective, but it's a powerful one.
So from the gene's perspective, the ultimate goal isn't really the survival or happiness of the individual body,
Not primarily, no.
but the act of reproduction itself.
No,
Because that's what lets the genes keep going.
precisely. The drive to reproduce is paramount because that's the pathway to a kind of genetic immortality, or at least, long-term persistence. The individual is temporary. The gene line can be potentially very long-lasting.
This really clicks with that philosophical parallel the audio mentioned with Arthur Schopenhauer.
Oh, yeah. That's a fascinating connection, isn't it? Schopenhauer, writing way before modern genetics, obviously.
Right.
He talked about this concept he called the will to life. He argued there's this underlying, often unconscious force driving all living things. And its main aim, he thought, wasn't individual happiness, but the continuation of the species.
That species, okay.
He suggested that things like falling in love, marriage, sexual attraction, they aren't just about our conscious desires for companionship or pleasure. He thought they were essentially tricks or strategies used by this will to life to make sure we reproduce.
Wow. So like romantic love is basically the will to life, tricking our minds into making babies.
That's a pretty good summary of his angle. He believed this fundamental force kind of manipulates our conscious desires to serve its own end, which is species survival perpetuation.
It's really striking echo of the selfish gene idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
That our actions, deep down, are serving the replication of something beyond our individual selves.
Absolutely. Serving the replication of genes, in Dawkins' case, or the will to life, in Schopenhauer's, often without us even realizing that's the underlying driver.
Now, it's important to remember, as the audio pointed out, that this selfish gene theory,
Hmm.
It's not like every scientist is totally on board, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's hugely influential, no doubt about it. But it has definitely sparked a lot of debate and discussion over the years.
There are criticisms.
Yes, there are valid criticisms and alternative perspectives. Some scientists emphasize selection acting at other levels, like the group or even the species, or point to the complex interplay of many different evolutionary forces. It's one powerful framework, but not the only one.
And for anyone listening who finds this really intriguing and wants to go deeper,
Yeah,
the audio recommended checking out Richard Dawkins' book, The Selfish Gene.
definitely. It's the source text, really, a seminal work that still shapes a lot of thinking about evolution.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Let's summarize this deep dive.
Sounds good.
We started with natural selection, the basic idea that traits helping an organism survive and reproduce in its environment tend to become more common.
Right, the environmental filter idea.
Then we layered on the selfish gene theory, which proposes that this selection process really operates at the level of the genes themselves.
Hmm. And these genes build organisms as essentially vehicles or survival machines to ensure their own copying and survival through reproduction.
Exactly. It provides this powerful, though maybe sometimes counterintuitive lens on what fundamentally drives life.
Yeah, it suggests that at the most basic biological level, the point isn't necessarily individual flourishing, but the persistence of genes across time, the journey of the replicators.
It certainly gives you a different way to think about the natural world and, well, our own place in it.
It does.
And it leads to some big questions, doesn't it? If our bodies are primarily gene carriers, like this theory suggests,
Hmm.
how does that change our understanding of purpose or meaning or existence?
That's the big one.
Is there more to the story than just this relentless drive for genetic survival? It's definitely something to chew on, a truly thought-provoking idea to consider.